Hi everyone, I thought I would start a new reading vlog today and it's one I've been looking forward to doing for ages. So I want to do a video where I read other booktubers' favourite books of 2021. This could obviously be a huge video. I follow a lot of booktubers, but I have gone through a lot of favourites videos. I actually started organising this when not everyone had posted, but I went through ones that had been posted at the beginning of the year, and what I decided to do was to pick books that appealed to me. Essentially, I didn't want to go to other booktubers' favourites videos and just pick their number one, even if it didn't sound as if it would be my cup of tea, because that just seems like a waste of time for everybody. So I went through lots of videos and I picked books that I really loved the sound of. I have now bought them, and over the course of the next week or so, I'm going to be reading them and talking to you about them. I've just been having a little giggle to myself because my mum-in-law just sent me this photo of Lola. I think someone's been digging. That tickled me a lot. It is a weekday, so this is a work day, but I just want to start this video on my lunch break, and then I'll come back to you once I have been reading them and I can update you and tell you my thoughts. Yesterday I went for a walk on the heath with Lauren, which was really lovely. I made us lunch and I decided to take custard in a flask so that I could take the apple pie that I had made the other day, and that we could stop and eat that halfway through and warm ourselves up because it was kind of cold. And we made friends with a robin who was very, very desperate to get some of the apple pie. All right, onto the book. So I have 5 here that I'm going to be reading. The first one is Ring Shout by Djèlí Clark, and I was encouraged to pick up this one based on Tori's review in her favourite books video, and I'll link all of these videos down below. But this is a book about murdering members of the Ku Klux Klan, and it says it's fantastically fun, even as at its core it's as serious as it can be. And this is what Tori had to say about it.
I have gushed about Ring Shout non-stop in maybe not non-stop, but like a lot. I feel like I have been talking about Ring Shout all year long, and rightfully so. This was just unreal. There are just certain books that you know could not have been written by anybody else other than the author who wrote it. Like, it is just, there's no way. This book could not have been written by anybody else except Djèlí Clark.
Next is a book that I already owned, but I was reminded of it by Iggy. Again, I will link her channel down below. This is Priestdaddy by Patricia Lockwood. She is the author of No One Is Talking About This, which I also have on my shelf, but this is her memoir, and this is what Iggy had to say.
I found Patricia Lockwood to be the funniest author or voice I have ever read, come across, and consumed ever, and it was a blast. That book is a crowd pleaser 100%. I feel like you can give that to anybody and they're gonna find it absolutely fabulous.
Then Dee is the only person that I have heard talk about this book, I think, and this is published by Daunt Books, and I love Daunt Books as in the bookshop, and they do publish some really interesting stuff too. I love the cover of this. This is Winter in Sokcho by Elisa, Shua, Dusapin, and this is translated from the French by Anissa Abbas-Higgins. I will insert a sound clip of Dee talking about this book so you can see why I decided to pick it up.
We follow the main protagonist, who is a French-Korean woman, or Korean-French woman, and she works like in this town that's on the border of North and South Korea, and like it's kind of like a hotel B&B place. And one day, like, a French graphic novelist comes to like stay and to write his graphic novel, and escapades ensue.
There were a couple of books in Lauren's favourite books of the year that I was tempted to pick up, but she's talked about this one quite a lot, so I decided to go for this. And the reason I hadn't picked it up before is because it's a pandemic book, but I'm going to give it a go, and this is Severance by Ling Ma. And I think it's not really like just a pandemic book. The reason that I'm intrigued by it is she says that it's so many different things thrown together that you might not expect to work, but it does. And this is what she said about it.
This, for a long while, once I'd read this, I was like, well, this is the best book I've read all year. This is the best book I've read all year. And then gradually I read a few more things, but this was fantastic. So this follows a young girl called Candice, and she is Chinese, living in the US and working for in an office job. While this is all going on, there's a sort of apocalyptic pandemic.
And then finally, this is a book I'd had my eye on primarily because of the cover, because the cover is beautiful, and that's The Need by Helen Phillips. favourites, but Sophie included it in her favourite books of the year, so I decided that I would pick it up. And I realised I don't think I'd really looked at the blurb properly before, because when I did look at the blurb, it's about someone who's discovering objects that don't make sense. So things like a Coke bottle with lettering that leans the wrong way and an alternative version of the Bible. Sophie really, really loved it. This is what she had to say about it.
This is probably my book of the year in that I read it a long time ago and like my best fiction book of the year certainly, and I can remember every detail of this flipping book. I don't want to spoil it by going into too much detail, but we follow a woman who is an archaeologist and she's undertaking a dig, and she finds something odd in the dig. She finds something odd in the hole. It's looking at the way that we view ourselves, the way that we objectify ourselves, boundaries. It's just brilliant, and it's terrifying.
So these are the 5 books that I'm going to be reading over the course of this reading vlog, and I'm going to see if I agree with other booktubers, whether I happen to love them too. I will come back when I have things to say. Hi, as you will have seen in that last clip, I did make macarons, which is something that I said I was going to attempt to do, I think in a December reading vlog, because in that particular vlog I was making gingerbread cookies to gift as Christmas presents, and I bought that tea tin that you would have seen in the last clip and a couple others, but I hadn't paid attention to the measurements of the tin when I ordered them, and they were far too small for gingerbread cookies. This is another one of the ones that I bought. So when they arrived and I realized that, I thought, you know what, if I can make macarons, this would be a really good tin to gift macarons in. So I decided to do that, to give some to Sanne because it was her birthday last month. So I did that and they worked out quite well. I will say that I think the first ever time I made them, they were the best. I think it was beginner's luck. And the ones I've done since haven't been quite so good aesthetically, but they have tasted really good. I will link the recipe that I use in the description box down below. It's a website called, I think she's called Sally's Baking, and that's the website where I got the gingerbread cupcake recipes, which are my favorite ever cupcakes, and I've made those in reading vlogs before. I'll link that reading vlog and that recipe also in the description box down below. So in a bit, I'm gonna go for a walk with Sanne to give her those macarons. And before that, I also have a viewing. Mr. M and I are trying to move, have been trying to move for a while, since last summer. Obviously, it's very difficult to try and move at the moment, especially when you are shielding. So it's been an interesting time, but the place that we're seeing today doesn't have any photos available. I got a call from the estate agent saying, this is brand new, we have no floor plan, we have no photographs, would you like to see it before anybody else? And when that happens, that can be really exciting, but it can also mean that there are no photos for a reason. So I'm going in with an open mind, and we will see. We've been, as I said, looking since last summer, really seriously looking since September. We were going to stay in this place for longer. We had plans to turn the attic that is not an attic into a second bedroom, and then we realised we couldn't do that. And like most people, what we need from the place that we live in has changed vastly over the past couple of years. Now we both work from home, so we have, I'm just looking around at this space, we have needed to move, and we found somewhere in December that we really, really loved, but we didn't end up getting it. We weren't the people who ended up being chosen, which broke my heart a little bit, and I'm still looking for the place, you know, that gives me the feelings that that place did. So keep your fingers and toes crossed, friends. Anyway, we're here to talk about books, so let's talk about that. I'm sure that when we actually move, I'll make a whole video talking about it, because it's been a time. So I have read a book. I have read Winter in Sokcho by Elisa Shua Dusapin, which is translated from the French by Anisa Abbas Higgins. This is one of those books, and I feel like this doesn't happen hugely often with me, where I just thought it was okay. You know, I can see the merits in this book, and I enjoyed the process of reading it, but at the same time I felt very removed from it. I felt as if it was quite obvious what the author was doing, and I could see it all playing out before me in a very non-surprising way, which I feel like was kind of the point. You know, sometimes you read a book where the character's life is very mundane, so we're focusing on a lot of very mundane things. This particular protagonist, she's stuck in this in-between space, so the writing reflects her being stuck, and whilst I can understand why that has been done, it doesn't particularly make, for me personally, a very exciting reading experience. It feels like a bit of a merry-go-round, because the end of each chapter ramps up and you get some really interesting, sometimes dark imagery, and then it just immediately slinks back into this nonchalant, weighted feeling that she has at the beginning of each chapter, which leaves you feeling frustrated, like her. The book that it reminded me of a lot was A Lover's Dictionary by Djèlí, which I had very similar feelings about. So in both books, it's a female protagonist who is in a relationship with a man from another country, and there's a lot of discussion going on about identity and nationality and how people perceive your nationality. All of those things are discussions that I really enjoy, but in both books I felt that those discussions were really heavy-handed. In Sokcho, the unnamed narrator starts a relationship or is infatuated with a French man who comes to stay at the B&B that she works at. She herself is half French but has never felt half French because she's only ever lived in South Korea. She lives in a village near the border between North and South, and she's frustrated that this French man has come over and is romanticizing the place that she lives. He's there to draw it for a graphic novel, and she's like, you don't understand this place. You think that war is a fun artistic thing for you to come and observe. We are living in this borrowed time where the threat of North Korea is just over there, and that could overwhelm us at any given moment. In Sokcho, they discuss identity through the lens of art, and in A Lover's Dictionary, they discuss identity, primarily British, German and Chinese identity, through Barthes and Lit Crit. So if you like Djèlí's work, then I really think that you'll enjoy Sokcho. But for me, as I said, I liked it, but I didn't love it. So that's one book down. I'm going to move on to the next one, but right now I need to go to this viewing and then go and meet Sanne for a walk. Good morning. We have our first DNF of the vlog. We're not off to a brilliant start, are we? But I predict that things are going to get better. I feel it. I feel it. So we have our first DNF and hopefully our only DNF of the vlog. And that is Priestdaddy by Patricia Lockwood. And I both am surprised and I'm also not surprised. So let me explain. This was the one that I already owned. So I'd already bought it. I'd already decided at some point that I wanted to read it. But I do also remember when I bought it that I was hesitant. I hadn't picked it up for ages. And then I saw that Anna James had loved it. And I know that Katie from Storytellers Inc., which is a bookshop that I love Katie, that they both loved this book and they just kept talking about it. And you know when people just manage to convince you over time, they weren't even directing that recommendation to me, it was just general recommendations out in the internet book sphere, and I just kept on seeing them recommend it, and I thought, you know what, maybe I should check this out. And this was years ago. It was well before nobody was talking about this book, and it's been sitting on my shelf. So I bought it and I clearly hadn't had the urge to pick it up since, and this is a really good excuse for me to get round to it actually. And I'm sad that I didn't end up loving it, but it is humour. And I think with humour, that's so subjective. So I was reading this, I read about 100 pages of it, and I recognise that it's a very good book and it is very well written, but just the style of it is just not something that I personally really love. So I can confidently recommend this to lots of people. And what I would say is that I would suggest reading a sample of it online, and if you like that sample, then I predict you'll like the rest of the book. So this is a memoir. She's talking about her father, who's a priest, and he's very over the top, and I kept on imagining him as Hopper from Stranger Things. That's just who I have in my head as I was reading this book. She's one of, I think, 5 siblings, if I've remembered that correctly, and she left home at 19 to go and be with a man that she had met on the internet, and 12 years later she returns to her family home with Jason, and that is where it opens. So you're filling in all the blanks as you go along, and some of it really did make me giggle. So this is after her father was ordained when she was younger. After it was all over, everyone had to call him father, but I called him that anyway, so it made no difference to me. All fathers believe they are God, and I took it for granted that my father especially believed it. This is another conversation where she's trying to talk to her mum about the fact that she's going to meet a man from the internet. Why should I trust the internet? My mother said. It gets into my house and I don't know how. Well, so does electricity, I pointed out, which has fried many children in its day, she said significantly. Put your finger in the wrong hole and face the consequences. What your mother is trying to say, my father interrupted, is that if you go through with this, anything could happen to you. Anything at all. My heart caught in the air like a parachute. If I looked up, I knew I might see Jesus spiriting me away to another place. Why else would I be doing it? Those were sections that I particularly loved. Elsewhere, through my particular reading lens, I felt as if it was overwritten and I wasn't really gelling with that style. So I've decided to part ways with it, and I'm sure it will find a much happier home. And I'm very glad that I have finally picked it up and decided whether or not this book is for me. But as I said, I'm sure loads of other people will love it. In fact, loads of other people do love it. This is definitely the case of me being one of the odd ones out. So check it out if you think it might be your cup of tea. I am going to get ready to go to a hospital appointment because I need to leave, and it is down on the Thames, so let me insert some footage here of Big Ben for other people who also miss it like I do, and I will see you when I have read another book. Good afternoon. It is a few days later and I have now read The Need by Helen Phillips, and I maintain this is still one of the best book covers ever. Who is the book cover by? It's by someone called Kazusaki, and I think it is brilliant. All right, this book, I knew we were going to go on an upward streak after a bit of a shaky start. This book is very creepy. Sophie is correct. I wobbled a little bit with it at one point because there's a reveal near the beginning that I just thought, really? We're doing this? I am not sure that you're gonna make that work. But it did. I feel like I have read and also been made aware of lots of anthropomorphic motherhood books recently, like Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder, which I really enjoyed. I read that last year. And this book does use animal imagery, as you can tell by the cover, but it's not in the literal way that Night Bitch uses that. No one is turning into a deer in this book, but I liked the imagery creating a stalking feeling. It really reminded me of Leave the World Behind by Rumen Alarm, which was one of my favourite books of 2020. So that's definitely a good start. This novel opens with a woman called Molly who is in a corner of one of her children's bedrooms, terrified, grabbing her kids to her because she's sure that there's somebody who's in her house. But then she starts talking herself down from this panic state. You know, you're sleep deprived, you're not thinking about things properly. Of course there's no one in your house. But there's someone in her house. It's really Moorish because the chapters are really short and we go from the present back to earlier that day. And each of the present day sections ends with such a chilling line. Right, so this is when she's convinced herself no one is outside and it's the end of the first chapter. She listened hard for the footsteps, but there were none. She stood up, she raised Ben's limp, snoozing body to her chest. She flicked the light on, the room looked warm, orderly. The grey quilt tucked tight at the corners. She would make mac and cheese. She would thaw some peas. She stepped towards the doorway where Viv stood, peering out. "Who's that guy, Mummy?" Viv said. Nah. So I liked the very obvious suspenseful way it kept the reader engaged by chopping back and forward in time and always ending on a horrible line like that. I really liked that. Then, as I said, there is a strange revelation that I wasn't sold on to begin with, and I thought this book could really deflate for me. You're gonna have to do some serious groundwork to make me believe the stuff that you're telling me. But I really enjoyed how this book continued to evolve. Molly is someone who works at a dig, and she'd been finding mysterious objects that exist in our world but are slightly different. So there was a Coke bottle where the writing was slightly off. There was a Bible where all the pronouns relating to God were labelled as she, and it was creating quite a stir. So at the dig, lots of people are having to show tourists round because it's caused so much buzz, and a lot of her time has been taken up with other people's curiosity. I don't want to say too much about this book because of that reveal that is so early on, but I will say that I think this book is a brilliant exploration of the terrifying nature of motherhood and feeling isolated and worrying that you are losing your mind. There are also really funny bits that talk about these fears. So there's one part that said, she and David, who's her husband, had a running joke about how they both feared their kids at night, the same way that as children they'd feared monsters under the bed, beasts that would rise up from the side of your bed, seize you with sharp nails and demand things of you. This book is like a twisted exploration of children's make-believe. It's about what it means to exist and how quickly things can be taken away from you. There's also a lot of fun wordplay in here relating to living, and of course Molly's name itself is wordplay because Molly is a slang word for ecstasy and drugs and hallucination. I would say if you enjoyed the TV show Dark, then you will really love this book. This book is trying to do on a micro scale what Dark tried to do, and I feel that Dark really caved in on itself the further away it got from its own starting line. It was trying to do too much and it became a bit ridiculous, whereas this book, I can suspend my disbelief for this period of time, feel everything, still remain extremely scared and tense and invested. So if that sounds like it appeals to you, then definitely pick it up. I know I haven't said too much about the plot, but that's because I really don't want to spoil it for you. If you want a literary kind of thriller like Rumen Alarm's Leave the World Behind, this book is for you. I think I might pick up Severance by Ling Ma next, so I'll come back to you when I have read that. I'm not really checking in at the moment during books. I'm coming back to you at the end because there's a lot of stuff going on. House stuff may be happening. As I mentioned in a previous clip, there was a place that Mr. M and I fell in love with in December that we didn't end up getting, but the people who were going to move in there now can't. So they have come back to us, and I am trying not to be too invested. Who am I kidding? I'm absolutely invested. But if it all goes to plan, it looks like we should be moving very quickly, actually, in the next month or so. So I am very very, very excited about that if that does go to plan. So I have a lot of stuff going on with that, plus book deadline. Plus I've had a lovely arthritic flare-up recently, which has been extremely painful, which I will spare you the details of. But yes, I'm only coming back to you when I have finished books. So when I have finished Severance, I will come back to you and we will talk some more. I think that Severance deserves an award just for how many things are inside it. It feels like a magic trick that this book is only, well, not even 300 pages. And in this book, we have the life of Candice, our main character, all of her young adult life. We have a pandemic, then we have a post-apocalyptic setting, and then we also jump back to her childhood and her parents migrating from China to America. It's just so many things to cram into such a short book. And at no point did I feel like each section was rushed. Everything felt very purposeful. So for that, I really, really applaud it. I think this is one of those novels that I'm going to be thinking about for a really long time, but I don't think it's going to be a favourite of mine. Let me explain why. So parts of this book really remind me of Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. They look at art, they look at religion in a post-apocalyptic setting, and the way that they use time to map out the characters' lives is also very similar. There are of course elements in this too that remind me of other post-apocalyptic stuff like The Walking Dead. I feel like you can't really escape comparison when it comes to that particular genre because so many people have done it before, and if we're really honing in on the horribleness of humanity in a very basic setting where resources are sparse, there are going to be storylines that you come back to time and time again. However, there are things about this book that are very different to other dystopian post-apocalyptic books that I have read before, and this is in part a satire. And what I enjoy about this is the way that it explores capitalism. Initially, Candice's parents moved from China to the States to follow the American dream, which is of course rooted in capitalism. And then when Candice grows up, she gets a job working in a publishing company, and she has to return to China to source materials and a factory to produce the products that her American company wants to sell. And she's confronted with the fact that she is exploiting, or she feels like she is exploiting, her ancestors in order to fill her pockets and the pockets of the people around her. And not only are they just selling any kind of product, they are selling Bibles and expensive Bibles and thinking of new and innovative ways to, I guess, reinvent religion to make people feel like they want to spend money on it. They're trying to make people spend money on things that cannot be bought. They're trying to encourage people to spend money to save themselves. Then a pandemic hits and everyone who works in her office flees and goes back to their family out of New York City. No one wants to be in the city. But at this point, and you know this from the very beginning of the book, Candice doesn't have any family anymore. Her family is her job. That's the thing that has become important to her. Everyone else looks at her like she's really strange. They're like, Candice, you need to value something else instead. And she's like, well, this is all I have now. So she clings to capitalism and stays in her job as it becomes a ghost town. We're then presented with another time period somewhat in the future where she's with a group of people having finally left New York, run by a guy who basically thinks he's Jesus and is trying to manipulate religion, this time for what he wants, and is trying to get them to a place called the Facility, which I guess in loads of other post-apocalyptic places would be some kind of scientific base where they think there may be a cure, but in this case ends up being a shopping mall. So his church is capitalism. So there is so much stuff going on in this book about money and capitalism and family and heritage, belonging. There's just so many different threads. It's incredible. There's also something that happens right at the end, which I cannot talk about, obviously, because spoilers, but there's a certain element to do with the ending that I think is a bit ambiguous, but at the same time leading. And if anyone has read the book, I would love to discuss the ending with you. I would just love that. So yes, very much enjoyed this book. How exciting. And now we're on to the final book of the 5, which is Ring Shout. Hi, so we are here with the final segment and we are ending on a high. I have finished reading Ring Shout by Djèlí Clark, which was Tori's recommendation, and I loved it. I think I said at the beginning that this is a book about a girl called Marcy who is killing members of the Ku Klux Klan, and that's not actually, it is accurate, but there is a slight change in that because this is a partly fantasy novel, which is amazing. So there are clans in this book who are human, but then there are also Ku Kluxes who are clans who have been turned into kind of werewolf-like creatures. And it's not the human clans that they are killing, because Marcy's relatives say we shouldn't kill those people because maybe they'll redeem themselves, they're awful people, but maybe wait. Whereas the werewolf Ku Kluxes absolutely kill them dead. So a lot of this book is about her killing these Ku Kluxes. And if I was going to do book maths on this book, I would say that it is like Jordan Peele meets Inglourious Bastards meets Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. It has all of the fantastical elements of Pet, and it has the violence of things like Inglourious Bastards, but incorporating that element of film propaganda, because that film is all about Goebbels and his propaganda and then wanting to burn down the cinema. And in this book, it's about burning down cinemas who is showing Birth of a Nation, and it's through the propaganda that clans are being turned into Ku Kluxes. It is all about the power of media. We've got elements of Toni Morrison in here. We have got some African American folktales, and if you want to research that, you can find them in this book here, which I'll also list in the description box down below. But as I said, that maybe I didn't say, the language in this is so rich and amazing. I want to read you a little bit. So Marcy has this sword that sings, and Marcy can speak to her ancestors. This whole book is steeped in magic, and this sword speaks on behalf of her ancestors. It says, "I have a sword that sings. It comes to me at a thought and a half-whispered prayer, pulled from nothingness into my waiting grip, a silver hilt joined to smoke that moves like black oil before dripping away. The flat leaf-shaped blade it leaves behind is almost half my height, with designs cut into dark iron. Visions dance in my head as they always do when the sword comes, a man pounding out silver with raw cut-up feet in mines in Peru, a woman screaming and pushing out birth blood in the bowels of a slave ship, a boy wading to his chest in a rice field in the Carolinas. All this happens in a few blinks. My sword is up and gripped, two-fisted to meet the Ku Kluxes, bearing down on me. Big as it is, the blade is always the same easy, balanced weight, like it was just made for me. In a sudden burst, the black iron explodes with light, like one of them African gods cracking open a brilliant eye." I am always here for politically charged horror books, and that is exactly what this book is. So I think if I'm going to rate the 5 books that I read in this video, the bottom of the pile would be Iggy's recommendation, which was Priestdaddy by Patricia Lockwood. Sorry, Iggy. Then it would be Dee's Winter in Sokcho by Elisa, Shua, Dusapin. Then can I separate these two? I don't think I can at the moment. I just really enjoyed both of these books. So this is Severance by Ling Ma, which was Lauren's recommendation, and Ring Shout by Djèlí Clark, which was Tori's recommendation. And then I think my favourite, but only a tiny bit more than those ones, was The Need by Helen Phillips, which was Sophie's recommendation. So 3 out of 5 isn't bad, really. I would love to know what you think you would enjoy out of these 5, and indeed which one you have loved, or ones you have loved, if you have read some of them already. I hope that you enjoyed this vlog. I have many other themed reading vlogs in the pipeline, which will be coming out in the not too distant future, I hope. I hope you're all having a very good start to the week. If you're new here, please do subscribe. It would be lovely to see you again. And if you enjoy the content that I upload to this channel and fancy supporting me on Patreon, that's always very kind. Links are in the description box down below. I'll speak to you all soon. Sending lots of love. Bye.